Hello, Dave here. This mini morsel, learn JavaScript with me. And this one is add employee object intro. We're working on chapter 6 of the book Modern JavaScript, Develop and Design. Here's the book, Modern JavaScript, Develop and Design by Larry Ullman. And you can review the book at larryullman.com. And I can just go ahead and get rid of that for right now. So going through, I've done chapter 4, chapter 5, and this is chapter 6, and I guess I'm referring to this as the end of the beginner's part, and next we move into functions and into, I guess, the very start of what I would consider intermediate, or I'm hoping that. Again, I'm learning this along with you, or hopefully we're learning this together. So starting to use objects, this is object-oriented programs, and objects are in JavaScript are generally created of two pieces, properties, also known as attributes, and the other piece is methods or functions. So these can be built in to an object, and this part is just starting to create objects and built from properties. So we're not getting into methods at this point because we're still in chapter 6 and we're still beginning. So this exercise from the book has us creating, it's calling add an employee, but basically what we're doing is having a form, entering a first name and a last name and a department, putting that all together with today's date and creating an employee object. And for example, I'll put in a last name of Jones and a first name of Charlie, and they'll work in the boogie boards department. I'll click the button to add that employee, and we display employee added, name Charlie, Jones. And again, I put Jones in first name and Charlie in last name. So it's last name, first name. The department is boogie boards, using a little drop down, and the hire date is Tuesday, July 3rd, 2012. So for those of you in the US, happy 4th of July, 2012. Let's go ahead and try that with more common last name. So if I change this to Charlie Jones, and let's just switch their department to surfboards, and it's Jones, Charlie surfboards. But again, doesn't really matter. It's just text. But we've created this this object here. All right, let's go ahead and take a little deeper look at creating an object, because this is going to be the basis probably for most of what we will end up doing in JavaScript. I'm expecting, again, I'm still learning, but I'm thinking if we're using an object-oriented language and programming, then objects are a key piece of the puzzle. So while creating this extremely simple version of an object, we still have to start here to get it down. So let's go ahead and look at it in Firefox here. And if I go into Firefox, we have our wonderful tools. I'll go to Web Developer, Web Console. I have this console here. I'll go ahead and clear it just for the fun of it. And let's go ahead and create an object and just look at its general syntax. Then we'll take a look at this exercise and the syntax and the code behind it, and just walk through the debugger real quick to see how it all works together. So let's create an object. And that's the beauty of the console and the beauty of, we could either use the Firebug console, I'll do one of each, or this web developer console. I guess I like both of them. So I'm going to create a variable, I'm going to create a variable called new, and trying to use good syntax in the camel case starts out with all lowercase. So I'm going to call it new example object, and it is going to be equal to, so let's go ahead and give it its, so we need the curly braces just to make it nice and fun, and then each property, the property name is specified and has a colon, and then we actually provide the value after the colon. So I'm going to add a couple of values, just like the employee example in a moment. So our first property, let's just give it a, and I'll call it test number colon, and we'll go ahead and give it a number, and I'll give it 135, and then we separate it with a comma. So there's our first property as test number, and I'm going to give it test string colon, and we'll go at this is a string in my object, comma, and I'll go date in object, colon, new, date, uppercase, and I'll just use today's date just to make it easier on myself, and end it with that guy. Hit enter, and now I should have a new object out there. So our new object is new example object, and notice it shows us the various properties of our object. And if I just click on one of those, see how it shows us the values in there. I'm going to close that, and then to look at the individual pieces of that puzzle, well, let's use some of the standard pieces of the puzzle. So new example object dot test number 135. So this is how we can work with those values. So anyway, so this is basically creating our object, and it's very similar to the object used in the test code. And once again, playing around with it, play around with it, look up the possible values, the possible things you could do. And again, we're not creating methods yet. So if we create a function inside this object, that'll be called a method. And that's for, I believe we learn how to do that in chapter 7. And looking forward to getting into that. I'm going to go ahead and clear this up above here and close that one down. And it's pretty much the same thing if I go into Firebug here. I'm just going to reload this and bring up my, here's the JavaScript code that we're going to be working with in a moment. But again, if I come down to the console, and I can go to console here, I can type clear, and let's go ahead and create a similar object. I'm going to go ahead and create it there, test object FB for Firebug, and give it the squirrely brackets, and I'm going to give it prop 1 for property number 1, and I'll call that a number, and that's 222, comma, and prop2 colon, and let's give that a string, property string, and this is just to see it in the other console here. Let me finish that with the thing, and if I go test object FB, it did not create it. So I have a syntax error. And let's see where my syntax error is. Missing before statement. And I believe I need the equal sign. And there we go. So now we see our two values. Notice that it shows us the number in blue and the property string in red, right? So we have a number, and I can go test object in Firebug dot, look at that, property2. See how it saves it? And I basically highlighted the one I wanted, and I hit the arrow key to put it in there. And I'm gonna let's try a new string in here. This is a new string, and I just hit the up arrow again to bring up my command, like the command prompt in Windows. And this is a new string, right? So anyway, so that is the basic syntax of working with objects. Now let's go ahead and look at the script here. Here's our script. I'm going to go ahead and let's look at it here in my editor. It's a little easier to see than here in the debugger, but then we'll go ahead and debug this quickly and consider ourselves introduced to objects. So first of all, here's the HTML. And again, we're talking about the HTML for this. Let me turn off Firebug here for a moment. Here's the HTML associated with this screen here. And if I give it a first name, right? First name, last name, and give it a department. And I just created some departments here. And I'll go with board shorts for department. Click my button, and it creates this last name, comma, first name employee for a specific department and their date. So once again, that's how it works. And here's the code involved. So we have a form. We have the first name NID, right? That's how we communicate with this HTML element. We have this last name NID. And again, I'm just naming them these values to keep it consistent and understand it. Then I have this select box with these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different values. And it is called department NID. And finally, we have a, and I just gave it a text value of surfs up, but we have this submit employee ID button, and the actual form ID is the employee form ID. So that's the applicable or the key information from the HTML. Here is the JavaScript code associated with it, right? Looks right, not that many lines of code. And once again, the JavaScript bottom to top. So window.onload. So once the window is loaded, we're going to wait for that surfs up button to be hit. When that button is hit, or when the window is loaded, we are going to start an event listener. and our event listener is going to wait for that surface up button. So when that button is pushed, it's going to trigger the onSubmit event and execute the add employee function. Our add employee function creates a variable to reference the value in first name ID. And again, that's why I made a point of talking about first name ID, last name ID, department in ID. So first name ID dot value is associated with first name in. And again, I'm creating these values, variables to use within the program. So first name, last name, and department. And here's the employee out information that we're putting back out to the screen, and it's employee out ID. Then we actually create our variable called employee work, and this is, notice the equal squirrely brackets. So this is our object. Property 1 is first name. Property 2 is last name, right? And I'm taking this variable and putting it into this property, and this variable and putting it into this property, and this variable and putting it into this property, and creating a higher date property that I'm using today's date for. And again, today's date is kind of like hard coding. It's a little hokey, but the idea here is just to show that we can have an object within an object, right? So this is a date object within our employee work object. And don't forget the semicolon at the end. Very important, and just specified that from the book. So I went ahead and put a little comment here, right? / for the comment. And then let's go ahead and work out the message out information. Notice the lack of any kind of validation, right? So we're not validating any of these variables. And again, the idea is just to understand the object. We'll get into more of the validation, I'm thinking, as we get into more complex programs. But right now, we're just accepting whatever comes in. So we create this message out variable. And again, we're using HTML, right? So I'm using an H2, heading 2 here. The employee was added, right? Their name property, or just the text name. But then I'm using, ooh, look at this, employee work dot last name, right? Employee work dot last name, right? So we're putting that attribute property out and concatenating that with employee work first name, right? Doing a line break and message out, concatenating to the end of this part of the message out, right? Then we got the department, another line break, another concatenation, and then let's put out the higher date, and we're putting it out using the toDateString method of the date object. And finally, putting it into the actual HTML using the inner HTML method and putting that variable message out that we just created out there, returning false to reset our function, and end of story. So let's run through a very quick debugger session of that, and we are introduced to objects. So let's go ahead and turn debugger back on, and let's reload our script. And it's got our HTML here. So I'm going to go ahead and say, give me my JavaScript. And I just happen to call it chapter 6 employee.javascript to keep track of it. And we'll set a breakpoint on the first executable statement of the first executable statement of our add employee function. So let's come up here and we will give it a first name, and we'll call this Mary Ann Marianne Johnson, and she will work in the surfboards department. And I go ahead and click the button. So when I click the button, we should come down here. We should stop at our breakpoint. So I click the button, and what we see is, notice we got the little arrow here, and this line is highlighted, so it's about to execute that line. I'm going to go ahead and bring this over a little bit so we can see it a little better. And again, right, all of these variables are undefined because I have not created them yet. So let's go ahead and start stepping through. We use this step into, or F11, to step through. I'm going to go ahead and click on it. So I click there, and it referenced, right? Notice when I hover over here, I got Marianne, the text Marianne there, and Marianne is filled in over here under our watch expressions. So we now have that variable in there. And we step again. And now we have Johnson and last name. And we step again. And we have surfboards for our department name. And we step again. And we have employee out defined, right? And it's basically referencing here, but it doesn't have any kind of value yet. And now we're ready to actually create our object. So I step, and it started creating the object. Step again. So now we have the first name property. And now we have the department property, or last name property. We're about to create the department property. And now we're about to create the hire date property. So now we have, notice that we have this employee work object, and notice that it's called an object, and I'm just hovering over employee work there, and it's showing object, first name equal Marianne, last name equal Johnson, department equals surfboards, and that there's more information there. And you can see the same type of information over here on our object, right? And it's showing the date in green, right? This object within this object. Hopefully that makes sense, because this is going to be the basis of probably everything we end up doing within the within JavaScript, is my expectation. Now we start putting together this message out information. So we can fill this area here. So we start doing the message out, and now we have the first part of our statement, right? Even with the HTML, notice the heading 2 information there. And we add the department to it, and now we're about, right? We're about to execute this line. Message out does have a value, and we're going to add this employee work dot hire date, the to date string method of that hire date. And now message out is completely filled, and we're ready to put it into the HTML. And now you see here is our HTML with the filled in value. And we're going to return false, and we're done. Return false, we're done. It's a Firebug is such a wonderful thing. I'm going to turn off my breakpoint. I'm going to turn off Firebug. We're going to just take a last look. Here's our Chapter 6, Add Employee Object Intro Exercise. And that's it. Thank you very much for watching. Once again, this code is available at davecoast.com. Out here, right, I have a global post out here, and you can download the code that we just looked at. You can go out to you can click that Learning JavaScript, which takes you here, or you can go directly to js.davecoast.com. And out there so far, only up through chapter 6. This is the last exercise in chapter 6, but we have the chapter 4 exercises, the chapter 5 exercises, and the chapter 6 exercises. And you can see here's that add employee object intro exercise that we just did. Or just go to the showcase and you see all 12 exercises that we've completed so far. And you can email me from here. Email me, dave@davecoast.com. I'd appreciate any feedback or any questions. Please just let me know. Leave a comment at the bottom of the video. Once again, Dave Coast presents Learn JavaScript with me. We're going through the book exercises. The book is Modern JavaScript, Develop and Design, and it was written by Larry Ullman. And you can review the book at larryullman.com. I picked it up from Amazon. I believe it was around $25 US dollars. And so far, I feel like at least going through these exercises, I'm learning something. So I think I've learned at least $25 worth of JavaScript so far, and anxious to get into some more intermediate and advanced items as we go along. Wish I could do it quicker, but it takes a while. Once again, this is Dave. Thank you very much for watching.